introduce Drew Kerr and Judy Stalker. And Drew began his career as a wetland ecologist in Seattle, working with Pacific Northwest amphibian conservation and research, and as the Aquatic Noxious Weed Specialist for King County DNR. Since 2005, he has been focused on the invasive plants of the tidal marshes and mudflats of the San Francisco Estuary. And he reminds me that he spoke on invasive Spartina for us many years ago. And Judy Stalker of Marin Audubon will then speak about removal efforts in Marin over the past 15 years and how you can help with that effort. So please welcome Judy and Drew. So Drew will start by sharing his screen.
Mm-hmm. Good. There we go. All right. You got the slideshow? All right. Great. Okay. Well, welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me and having Judy here to talk with you about invasive limonium, invasive sea lavender in the San Francisco Estuary. I'm going to go through, I'm going to utilize about 2/3 of the time that we have allotted. I'm going to go through some background on the plants, the ecology, and some of the work that we have done through the California Invasive Plant Council's management of, we're managing invasive limonium around the Bay, working with a lot of different partners and nurturing different partnerships that then often take over the management of the invasive limonium. And then Judy's going to join us after that and talk more specifically about all the work that she's done and with volunteers and Marin Audubon Society with contractors over the past 15 years. So we're going to start with the the main invasive limonium, invasive sea lavender is Limonium ramosissimum in San Francisco Estuary. We refer to it as Lyra throughout the rest of the presentation, or it's Algerian sea lavender. So a Mediterranean plant, and that's why it can get such a great boost and be so invasive, because it can grow so well in this Mediterranean climate. It was first discovered in San Francisco Estuary in 2007, down at Sanchez Marsh in San Mateo County, just south of SFO. Lyra grows most vigorously and produces the most seed in the high marsh and the estuarine terrestrial transition zone, sometimes referred to as the upland transition zone. The vast majority of them are found above mean high water, although we have found over the years now that we've delimited the scope of the infestation that it can thrive at the marsh plain elevation as well, and along well-drained channel banks when established at intact marshes. So I'll talk more about all these things as I go through the presentation. Both of these limoniums can also grow as a dense substratum beneath the native marsh vegetation, eventually displacing it, especially during regeneration cycles for some of those natives. But it is amazing. There's not many good things about the fight on invasive limonium. They're tough plants with a lot of tough characteristics, but native plants, intact native tidal marsh produces a ton of biotic resistance to invasion and really slows down the invasion. So that's one good thing. It can grow as a substratum and it takes a while to displace it, but it really does slow it down. So that's a good thing. It's not as aggressive in that one way. So we have photos from Ron Vanderhoff here, who's probably the premier California weed photographer, showing some close-ups of the inflorescence, nice big Lyra, and shows those pointed leaf tips, whereas the other invasive has more rounded leaf tips that I'll show you in a second. The second one is Limonium duriescum, sometimes referred to as European sea lavender, and I'll refer to it as Lidu throughout the rest of the presentation. This was also first documented in the San Francisco Estuary in 2007 at Richardson Bay in Marin County, Strawberry Marsh. Cal-IPC mapping over the years that we've been involved with limonium also discovered a very large, very well-established infestation on Bear Island at Deepwater Slough in the South Bay. And that is probably an independent introduction, not likely to have been natural dispersal on the tide due to the distance and because Lidu is not really established anywhere outside the Marin area except for a couple little tiny occurrences. It's the more Lidu is actually the more widespread of the invasive limoniums in Southern California, where it's a bigger problem and it is able to grow lower in the tidal elevation, well into the Spartina zone. So that it can do quite a bit more damage. You can see the really rounded leaf tips of it on the side there on the left, and its flower pattern is a little more scattered, a little bit more open, and very pretty little thing. Doesn't get to be a huge plant like some of the Lyra, but it can be a lot larger than the one I have in my hand there. So you have some side-by-sides here where we have our native Limonium californicum in the main photo on the right-hand side. Big floppy leaves, many fewer inflorescent stalks than the non-native ones. Also tends to get a lot of mildew on the leaves at certain times of year. You'll often see that even on healthy plants. And the Lyra is on the left-hand side. A couple, good-sized ones, also bolting, not in flower yet. Then you have the two invasives side by side on the right, with Lidu, the European one, on the left, and Lyra on the right. They tend to bolt through May and June. And here's our introduced Limonium perezii, which is a common landscaping plant that we see all over the bay. And I, after many, many years of thinking about this, wondering how did Lyra and Lidu get into our flora here and invade so many marshes? There's a couple of ways that we assisted them, and I'll get to that in a second. But despite occasionally spreading down into upland landscaping, the Limonium perezii has not proved to be invasive in the San Francisco Estuary. We mapped it in the early years of the California Invasive Plant Council project, and we do not see it moving more than a small incidental movements down into the marsh. But because it's planted all over the bay, I have a hypothesis that the Lyra and Lidu may have been growing in a nursery next to the Limonium perezii that was then outplanted with these stowaways, with these contaminants in the Limonium perezii plants. And that may have been one of the ways that the Lyra and Lidu were spread so widely throughout the estuary when they don't move that quickly on the tides between sites. That's my experience over now 12 years of working with them. Not a lot of movement. They certainly are capable of it, but they hopscotch in small bits and pieces, not huge movements across the bay. So since nobody actively plants Lyra or Lidu on purpose at marshes, and they are hardly ever seen in landscaping, their widespread introduction very well may have been accidental, and it may have been, in my hypothesis, a stowaway, a contaminant in perezii, which is everywhere. Unfortunately, the dispersal of invasive limonium got a big accidental boost through misidentification by a seed harvesting contractors, as the native sea lavender. And it was subsequently included as an upland transition zone in an upland transition zone seed mix that was widely sown for restoration around the South Bay in the early 2010s. There's also one known occurrence of Lyra being accidentally planted at a restoration marsh, Heron's Head in San Francisco, in the early 2000s. That's Peter Bay, personal communication to Kathy Boyer's lab. So you combine the seed mix, which really got into some remote and super high quality marshes that it would not have moved to on its own and in a rapid way, and you get the potential of it being a stowaway with Limonium perezii, and what you have is a quite widespread problem, far beyond the natural dispersal that Lyra and Lidu would have probably achieved over the same time period. The photo here shows a transition zone at Coyote Creek Lagoon in the very, very far southeastern corner of the estuary, well up near in Fremont, well upstream, and it was one of the recipients of that corrupted seed mix. Many, many miles upstream from its nearest Limonium ramosissimum neighbor at that tract in Pond 6, which was also unfortunately infested with that same seed mix. So these two are really far departed from any other infestations around the bay. And they were extremely dense when we first encountered them. This was back in 2016. So this is a map that kind of just shows the loose assemblage of how many sites we have around the bay. This does not include all sites that every entity is working on, but it includes the sites that California Invasive Plant Council works on with partners or independently. So we started with a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant in 2015 that allowed us to start a pilot project on basically delimiting the scope of the infestation and starting to do some management on about 15 to 20 sites, including several in Marin. And we then, as we got more funding and time progressed, we mapped and added into management about 70 other sites. We also have received CDFA Noxious Weed Program funding through anywhere from 3 to 5 counties, depending on the year, including, thankfully, Marin County has been quite generous and continuous with that funding. And we have gotten most of the top 10 largest sites have been reduced by 70 to 85% since the 2016-2018 onset, some of them being added in 2018, not in 2016. But of course, that requires, with this plant, and as you'll see why in a minute, that requires an annual maintenance effort to keep that level of achieved reduction. It does not happen on its own. So, as I'll mention, this is a great plant for manual removal at appropriate scales, and volunteers have played a huge role in the success of reductions around the bay over the past 10 to 15 years, depending. We have our own Judy Stalker here speaking today from Marin Audubon, as well as all of her own efforts over even more years than I've been working on this plant, these plants. And we have Martin Cooper, an amazing super volunteer for Save the Bay, who works at a ton of different sites, including a lot of sites at Eden Landing. Melissa Grush and her family that she brings out works at the Hayward Shoreline and Roberts Landing, removing hundreds of thousands of these plants. And a lot of these folks count the number of plants that they remove, which I could never do. But it's truly astounding. Friends of Five Creeks in Albany, Susan Swartz, Golden Gate Bird Alliance, formerly Golden Gate Audubon. Greens at Work are the stewards in the Richmond area, and they have removed over 1 million Limonium ramosissimum from their areas, and a number of other volunteers. We also have some great agency management partners. We have different agencies that we work with, but ones that actually have adopted the work and also do the removal work or the treatment work on their own, including San Mateo Parks down at Coyote Point, Marin County Parks, Port of San Francisco, state parks, East Bay Regional Parks, and Redwood City. We had the peak infestation was probably about 25 to 30 net acres around the bay, if you kind of add up the original discoveries of these sites once they had reached kind of their peak. There's so many invasive plants to deal with out there, right? But invasive plants are such an important impact to our native plants and such an important impact to our native habitat that those native plants create. They're vital that we work on these. They're just such a leading cause for degradation and loss of biodiversity. So we have to make good choices, right? So we want to use data-driven prioritization of targets, and then we adapt our knowledge through the lessons that practitioners learn over time, right? So the San Francisco State University, Kathy Boyer has a lab there. She's an amazing wetland ecologist and researcher. She's done a lot of work on different invasive plants. And her research through herself, as well as 2 grad students that she had, Gavin Archibald and Kirsten Couchmar, over several years, was critical in our decision at Cal-IPC to take action on the limoniums, as well as just seeing how widespread they had gotten on our own through our own time in the marsh. Their research showed how salt tolerant these species were, which was kind of a surprise considering they're introduced through the horticultural trade because they're so pretty. Impacts to the native marsh and to the native marsh vegetation, and the vigorous spread was really well documented by the Boyer Lab. Although after we kind of got a hold of the data and started to map on our own, we found that even their assessment of the vigorous spread were underestimates. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife had identified the lyra as one of the 3 highest concern plant species in the San Francisco Bay Weed Management Plan. And the ecological impacts really come down to the fact that the carpets of these short rosettes of lyra and lidu cannot provide our native wildlife with the same vertical plant structure that's comparable to the native plants in the tidal marsh that provides refugia from predators, especially at high tides, like the endangered, habitat for the endangered California ridgeways rail, the bird, and the salt marsh harvest mouse, where they're most vulnerable to avian predation when at extreme high tides. The invasive limoniums displace the Grandilia stricta, the marsh gum plant, the Frankinia salina, which can form really nice dense thickets and be good refugia, as well as other species that provide that vertical structure. The good thing about this weed is that manual removal is very effective. Local stewards, including trained volunteers, can play a huge role in managing this. Some other plants, that's just not possible. The slow pace at which manual removal is done is actually very thorough, which is great, removing all the little tinies, we call them, and really getting ahead of that next crop because it's got a 12-month growing season. And it reduces impacts from removal from under the native vegetation. These limoniums like to snug right up to our grandelias, snug right up to the native limonium, and it's very hard to treat those without some collateral damage, but you can do that really well with manual removal. Unfortunately, it's limited to infestations at an appropriate scale unless you have armies of people out there doing it, which most of the time we do not. We're limited in volunteers that can give their time and energy to these things, and labor is expensive. So but the manual removal can also be used for long-term management once infestations have been reduced to a more manageable level. One of the model projects is Literacy for Environmental Justice on the peninsula, working at Heron's Head Marsh with the Port of San Francisco. After we put in our effort for several years, reducing the infestation by maybe 70–75%, they, through a grant from the Restoration Authority, were able to take over that effort with a huge labor force that they can generate here, from the Bayview area, for literacy and for environmental justice, and they were able to manage that through manual removal then, even at the scale where it still is many thousands of plants every year that have to be removed. But super effective, and they're making a big dent in it, and they're also reintroducing a lot of native plants to that area finally, because they've gotten to that level in the control. Unfortunately, the landscape scale of the invasive limonium problem that I showed you on the map, and the grant funds that are limited, to necessitate that herbicide management is an important component of the IPM toolbox for these high threat invaders. So this shows how dense the Limonium ramosissimum can be, the lyra, colonizing areas of disturbance like wave-swept shorelines or along slough banks. Once it dominates, once it gets into a disturbed area, it's able to obviously colonize because there's not much biotic resistance. Then it dominates and excludes future native vegetation, and the regeneration, and it owns that space and won't give it back without management. Can also expand along channel banks in years when grandelias cycles, because grandelias are sort of a short-lived plant, maybe 5 years or so. And when they die back, normally they'll come back up from all the abundant seed that's sown at their base. But if you have Limonium ramosissimum or carpets of Limonium at the base of that, they can't regenerate, and that component that's so important for refugia, for tidal marsh wildlife, is then removed from the equation, and it becomes just a mat of the invasive limonium. So this shows kind of a marsh zonation graphic that was first produced by ESA PWA, and I've added the orange line there. It kind of shows the zone of limonium where it can grow. Can grow from down in the middle marsh area all the way up through the high marsh and up into the upland area, with that wetland upland transition zone being the area where San Francisco State produced the most seed and the largest plants. I call limonium both of them, but I call them tribbles. And if you know anything about Star Trek from the old days, the original Star Trek, the trouble with tribbles, they seem so small and innocuous. They're so pretty. The flowers are gorgeous, right? Although our native limonium is gorgeous as well. But the flowers that come from, especially lyra, are so dense and they're so vibrant in color. How could these plants be such a problem, right? Well, they are a problem. And once you get a few too many tribbles, you're buried in them. And like Captain Kirk up there in the visual. So they have extremely high seed production. It seems like those seeds are highly viable, and a relatively long seed bank life of probably 5 years at least. Add that to the fact that there's a virtually 12-month growing season here in our Mediterranean climate, and lyra can feel like these tribbles from Star Trek. If you look between the spaces between the more mature lyra in this photo, you'll see all these little tiny peppercorn-sized red leaves, and those are thousands more seedlings waiting to take over the space that you have carefully and diligently won back from the limonium through your management removal of whatever method was used. It'll just, if you let them go to seed, they will seed right back into that same area and reclaim it. Archibald and Boyer found up to 130,000 seeds per square meter in their research, especially at the upland transition zone. So invasive limonium, massive seed producer, 12-month growing season in the Bay Area. In these photos, you have areas that were treated with herbicide, and you can see the dead necromass, we call it, in between the two different cohorts of two different generations of the invasive limonium coming back. You have the ones that came back, maybe started last late summer, maybe autumn. They've had 6-8 months to grow to that nice mature size, and then you have all the little ones that have come up since then, since the rains have, in February, March, and the day length gets longer, the temperatures get higher, and you have then this recruitment from the seed bank. So you have both of those just ready to take over that space that you've won back from it. So it requires this diligent effort, and I'll get to that more, but that's one of the reasons why having local stewards adopt sites and give it that effort multiple times per year really makes a lot more progress than the single management incidents that we're able to really do on such a grand scale around the estuary with our limited grant funds. In the center photo here, you can see a plant that went to seed with its dense flower stalks, and all the seed that was dropped, came up as new plants the following year. So, and then you'll get a plant where you actually get good control of it. You had 100% mortality on the plant itself, but now that the rest of that plant is exposed to sunlight, it will sprout the seeds that have been deposited within that plant. So you see these, I call it cannibalizing. Of course, they're not parasitizing it. They're cannibalizing the carcass of a dead treated parent plant with 3, 4, 5 additional plants that are ready to take over after the competitive release from the parent plant being killed. So it goes on and on. So we have worked a lot with Civicor in the past few years in the Alameda shoreline, manually removing invasive Limonium ramuscissumum. And just again to emphasize, this is so great when we have a large crew like this, right? And East Bay Parks was funding this crew as well, so it didn't have to come out of our grant funding. And we can tackle infestations that are fairly large and can do them pretty quickly, when you have this many people. Again, manual removal is very effective when you have accessible sites, when you can get people out to them. We have a lot of remote sites. We have sites we have to go to by airboat. Those, of course, are not feasible targets for volunteer or community citizen science, but it's very doable if you have accessible sites. It's very time intensive, and so therefore manual removal is not necessarily feasible for moderate to large infestations. But it's really great for outliers, for nascent colonizers that have just come into an area and started. And you can get to them basically early detection and rapid response and get them out before they really get established and build a seed bank that takes a long time to get rid of. And where infestations have also, as I mentioned, been reduced by either contractors or agency management over several seasons down to a level that's more manageable. So I'm going to hit a few sites before I turn it over to Judy that the Cal-IPC project has done in the past, and I know that Judy is familiar with these sites and has worked herself on these sites before and maybe even during the past 10 years as well. But this has mainly been areas where we've put in the Cal-IPC contractor effort through our grant funds. So Strawberry Marsh in its first year of the Cal-IPC project in 2016, this is where Kathy Boyer's lab originally found the Lidu, the Limonium dariusculum, the European sea lavender. You can see these kind of pretty sprays of flowers that has the kind of more open, very more decorative, as opposed to that dense, heavy-duty color, purple of the lyra. Although there's some lyra in here as well. We're beginning to remove these dense rows of the invasive. And this site actually has the rare Chloropyron marinum palustri, the chamapa, as well. So you can see it on the picture in the right. You can see the chamapa kind of later in its flowering and the scattered little tiny flowers of the lidu in amongst it. This was the initial year when we went out there, we then changed our timing so that we could come into the chamapa. The chloropyron is an annual, and so you can come in and remove the perennial lidu lyra from the area before the chamapa has emerged from the seed bank. So you can really reduce your impacts, and then you still can get a nice heavy flush of the chloropyron, which is parasitic, hemiparasite on mostly our native vegetation, but it will also attach to the non-native limonium as well. And then this year, this is this year at Strawberry Marsh, the 11th year, and I'm going to emphasize the length of time because it's very important at realizing how long it takes to deal with these things. That this is the 11th year of Cal-IPC's involvement in Strawberry Marsh, and you can see the lush native tidal marsh plants on the right-hand side. The bench that was in the picture, the previous picture, the bench up here is now the bench over here. So you can see all these areas. This is before I even did any removal that day. You can't even see any in here. It took me hours to find the 21 invasive limonium individuals in this area of where the marsh has high quality habitat. There's a couple other patches in other areas of the marsh in the upland transition zone and over under the eucalyptus behind the gas station. But in the really nice areas of the marsh, there were only 21 invasive limonium individuals this year in this high quality habitat. And really, this is the dedicated local stewardship is key. We were able to come back to this marsh year after year and remove it. Marin County would also do some things on the edges and there's none in those areas this year. So it's the diligence and the long term, realizing that it's going to take a while to get rid of this stuff. So. And this is our first season at Clipper Yacht Harbor in 2018. And Marin Audubon had already been using volunteers at Clipper to try to slow the invasive proliferation in that site, but the invasion had really progressed too far for the labor that they could provide. It was pretty massive. We took a couple dump trucks worth of limonium out of the site in our first few days at the site in 2018. Mostly limonium, mostly lyra at this site. Then we came in the following year in 2019 and tried another method, tried another non-chemical method. And Marin County Parks had some really good success with propane flaming of the limonium. So we borrowed some propane torch equipment from them. We got our local burn permit from the local municipality, and we tried the propane flaming at Clipper Yacht Harbor in that follow-up season. You can see we have a backpack there with clean water, no chems in it, and a fire extinguisher as required by the burn permit from the local municipality. It's a straight-on shot of me doing the propane flaming. It works. It's most effective on small plants. It was most effective on small plants and seedlings, like the ones you see in the picture there, like little silver dollar sized plants. They ignite fairly quickly, but it's a very tedious and very time intensive task, and can really only be limited to small infestations. Marsh plants have a lot of moisture in them. They don't ignite rapidly, so you have to kind of stay focused on those plants for quite a while before they will ignite and do the job of burning them up. It was, to be honest, quite unpleasant, quite unhealthy fumes. We didn't feel so great afterwards. You have both carbon monoxide from the propane and you have the smoke from the burning vegetation. So not something that I really enjoyed. However, the flaming did seem to eliminate some of the surface seed bank as well as the mature plants that we got to ignite. And over the next couple of seasons, we did seem to see faster reductions at that site than we would see at a site normally with just manual removal alone. So that was pretty cool. But we've still been coming back to that site every year since 2019. Every single year, finding quite a few plants, but on a nice downward trajectory. And this year at Clipper Yacht Harbor in 2026, you can see the right-hand side shot here is the same shot as the dump truck area here, which was packed with piles of the lyra. And you can see we've removed about 2 bags from this general area, from this peninsula, and only about 6 total bags from the 2 peninsulas that compose that Clipper Yacht Harbor in 2026. So great reductions, but you have to keep on coming back, and you have to search for it. Once the native cover returns, that's marvelous, and that's what you want, but it does obstruct obscure the detection of the invasive plant. So you need to look harder for it, and you need to work diligently to keep on removing it. So, our goal here is to, allow to remove these invasives so we have a healthy, resilient native marshes that will mature and flourish. And you really need to have the ongoing stewardship. Luckily, if you can get folks to adopt sites and to really take it and go multiple times a year, that is so key to success. Because we have this 12-month growing season, you have such prolific seed production. If you can go in, during the time we normally do, and that in that March, April, May time, remove it, return in July, August, remove what you find then, and come back one more time in autumn. I've seen a number of sites, the reductions are just accelerated so much more, and you really achieve that native plant regeneration much more quickly. So that's the slides that I have, and I'm going to turn it over to Judy now to talk about all her efforts and Marin Audubon Society, and probably give you a refresher on some of the plant descriptions that I did. So let me stop sharing here. And did that do it? Did that stop sharing?
Still sharing.
Oh, I hit stop share. There we go.
Wait, let's try this. Okay. Thanks,
Stop
Drew.
share.
I just learned a lot. I learned a lot about something that's been in my head for a long time. Um, so yeah, I'm Judy Stalker from Marin, Audubon, and I'm a wildlife biologist, but I started out working with marine mammals and marine invertebrates, and then that led me to the wetlands, and then that led me to the native plants in the wetlands, and then inevitably, if you care about native plants, then you end up dealing with a lot of invasive plants. And so I did end up working with Drew many years ago for the invasive Spartina project. And I was out looking for Spartina when I found this plant. It was a limonium, but it didn't look like our native. And Kathy Boyer had put out a photo of an invasive limonium 6 months earlier, and it wasn't that same plant. So we brought Peter Bay and others, Kathy Boyer and Gavin Archibald, who went on to study this together and figured out what it was. And then I sort of watched it spreading throughout the bay and realized we can't do anything about it now. There was talk about getting a bay-wide effort going, but I thought that I could keep it managed in Marin because we only knew of a few areas where it was at that point. And so that's what I started 14 or 15 years ago. And got a lot of volunteers to help out, and I've been doing that ever since. And I'll show you where we've been doing it. I'm going to go really quickly through. Whoops, I'm not going anywhere. Huh. I want to go. Here we go. And the status that a lot of people are familiar with, that is a limonium. That's not an invasive. This is our native, has very sort of loose basal rosette. When you see it in the marsh, it's not crowding each other out. It's sort of spaced sparsely. And then here are examples of two of the invasives, the lyra on here, well, you can see it labeled, and the lidu. And then up on the top, that is actually lyra, but it's this other form that we see a lot of in Marin that's it's just bigger. It's bigger leaved. It's sort of broader leaves. It's a little darker. And so nobody really quite knows why. People were throwing around the idea that maybe it was a hybrid, but nobody has proven that. So it's called Limonium weirdo, and it gets the LIWE. But it is actually, as far as we know, another Ramosissimum, an Algerian sea lavender. Here you see can you see my cursor? Okay, you see the native, and right next to it is a little um, Algerian sea lavender, the Lyra. And yeah, so they're very different. So when you're out there removing it, you can definitely tell the difference. Here's the Limonium ramosissimum and the Limonium duriosculum side by side. The duriosculum is just tighter, smaller, round leaves. It almost looks like a succulent. And whoops. Here's a big ramosissimum. So, the difference between the little babies and the big ones. they look very different, but again, once you've been doing it, you catch the difference. This is in an area, these could be pretty big because of their age, but they're growing on very hard, sort of rocky soil, so they're more compact. So they do have different forms. This is the Duriosculum, again, like a little sort of succulent. These are its flower head. There's flower heads are similar to the, I guess, untrained eye, but it's shorter. Here's the carpet Drew was talking about, just a carpet of the Duriosculum in amongst the alkali heath and the saltgrass. And then here's this is showing it's I wish it was more zoomed in, but I'm trying to catch the whole southern Marin, mostly in Richardson Bay where we find it. If you look up at the purple circle up here, that's where that's Strawberry Marsh. That's where the Duriosculum, the European sea lavender, was found first by Kathy Boyer and Shayla Zabin. Were teaching a class on, I think it was on wetland plants. It might have even been on invasive wetland plants. And one of the students said, "Hey, what's this plant?" And nobody knew. So that's where that started, as far as we know, in Marin. And the colors represent which groups or agencies are managing them. So the red is Marin Audubon. It's Galilee Harbor, Schoonmaker Marina, Marina Plaza, Varda Landing, Richardson Bay, Kappa's, Gateway Plaza, Caltrans properties at Manzanita Park and Ride in that area, even some on Highway 101. And then the purple here is what Caltrans is. That's their property. I'm working with them to get it off of their property. The yellow is where the Marin County Parks manages theirs, and they do a really good job. They're able to go back at least twice a season. As Drew was saying, it's really important to be able to do that. Arambaru Island, a little island near Arambaru. And then Cal-IPC has taken on, as Drew said, some really sites that were really bad, and now they're doing really well. So the purple that you see, there's some over the purple circle. It's Strawberry Marsh, the Shoreline Center, and the Crystal property over by the sort of by the seaplane building. What else, Drew? I hope I'm not forgetting any of the sites you're doing. And then the Caltrans, I just explained, they're not really managing it, but they're doing a great job of supporting us. They'll bring their big trucks along as we're getting it anywhere where we're on the highway or the roads. They'll put cones out. They're really supporting the work that we're doing. So I do want to say that this is Marina Plaza. This is one of the sites that we do almost with volunteers. I don't know if you recognize Dana Morowitz and her partner Sky, and that's actually her mother, Terry. They are really, really faithful volunteers. Dana worked for Cal-IPC for several years. The importance of getting volunteers out is, and which is what I did for the first many years, is I still do, but it was strictly volunteers. Is that they know the plants after they've been working with them, and then they're sort of the eyes on the ground. So I really hope to get volunteers at each site that were local to that site. A lot of what we do is in marinas, and I did recruit some people, but it's good to have eyes on the ground. And now I'm going out of Southern Marin, and a good example of eyes on the ground. Some of you might know Roger Harris. He's a local biologist, and he was on our board, and he was hiking up at Loch Lomond Marina, way up in San Rafael. And he came back and said, "I think there's some of that invasive plant up there." And I said, "Oh, no, he must be wrong. It can't be that far up." Well, sure enough, it's there. And it's been there for the past like 5 years. So every year we've been going. I don't know if you've been up there, but that long levee that sort of surrounds the marina has some on the marina side, and then there's a little bit where the circle is. Here's some local volunteers. They live right there, and they've been really awesome at coming out and helping remove that. Here's sort of a before and after of the work that they were doing. And I have to say, to do this work, we can't just go and, start picking sea lavender. We have to get permissions. And Marin Audubon, as most of you know, has many wetland properties, but none of our wetland properties have the invasive sea lavender on them, except one is right next to where it is. So having to find out who owns the properties, getting the permissions from them, and providing them with all the paperwork, there's insurance and everything, is something that we have to do. We just don't go in and start pulling other people's plants. Corte Madera Marsh is another place where there's quite a bit of it. And again, somebody on our board who had come and helped remove it was walking out where you see all the red area with actually it was like with some, Department of Fish and Wildlife people for something else. And she started noticing the plant. And so we were able to get out there pretty early and start getting it. Now, this is an interesting site because where you see the purple, Drew goes after it on that side of Corte Madera Marsh, and also out by the water, and then up on the island by the ferry terminal. And then we go after it down where you see all the red. And we've kept it pretty contained. We go every year. California Department of Fish and Wildlife owns that property, and they're very, very happy to have us come do that. And then there's a lot of ridgeways rails out there. So I'm very particular about who comes out there. I don't bring school groups or anything out there because we need to walk really carefully in the marsh and, be very aware of what we're doing. And the property right to the left of all the red circles and lines is Marin Audubon's recent restoration project. And so it's very important to us that we keep that clear so that we're not invaded with the sea lavender. And we do get a little bit in there each year now, but we get it out. Here's some contractors. Okay, so I realized it's a lot of work to round up a lot of volunteers every year. So we started raising funds and hiring contractors and working with volunteers. And so that's been huge because the contractors get a lot done. They don't burn out as quickly as volunteers. They are expensive, but that's been really helpful to be able to get more of it. Here's a group of the volunteers that actually the three of them are very regular. One of them was visiting from Switzerland and she loved it. She loved coming out. This is Debbie Ablin. She comes out a lot and helps with the sea lavender removal. This is again at Corte Madera. And then just last year, you all know Carolyn Longstreth. She was doing her beach walk on the Bolinas Lagoon at Seadrift, and she called me and said, there's a lot of that invasive plant out there. So I went out, sure enough, lots of it out there. We got permission from Seadrift Association and brought the crew out, and they were able to pull it. You can see the purple that is going all along in that zone that Drew was talking about, a little bit higher up where the native limonium grows. So yeah, they got it all out, and we're going out there again, probably the end of this week to do it again. And whoops, so here they are getting it. I just want you to kind of look at the lagoon and think of like, if we don't get it out, all those seeds are going to go out all over that lagoon. And so I'm hoping that we've gotten it at a good time. Try to survey places as much as we can by kayak, by bicycle, by hiking, just to see where else it is when I have time. But I'm hopeful that it hasn't gone further in the lagoon. And they have it at Kent Island, and the Marin County Parks has been finding little bits of sea lavender at Kent Island, which is right over on the Bolinas side, if you don't know. And they were wondering where it came from. Well, now we know where it came from. And I don't know how this got there, but we'll see. Now this day, a couple of people from the Greater Fairlawns Association came out to learn what the plant was, and they helped pull some of it, because that is exactly where their planning a like a dune stabilization revegetation project. And so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to take over this effort out there in removing the sea lavender and keeping, keeping tabs on it. Now, some of the challenges we face are the rare chloropyron that Drew was talking about. That does grow in a lot of the sites that we go to, and it does, it has the what is it, the halstorium that plugs into the roots of the host plants to get the nutrients and water out. It can photosynthesize on its own, but it steals nutrients and water from other plants down at the root level. And a lot of times it's doing that with the invasive limonium. So here's an example. You can see the invasive limonium is just the little green plant right under the rare, it's called marsh bird's beak or chloropyron. So I wouldn't pull this one. If I were out there pulling, I would leave this one alone because it's too close, and I'd probably pull up the chloropyron with it. So what we do when we're in areas where there is chloropyron, I'm going to go back, is we make sure that whoever's doing it knows exactly what the chloropyron is, the situation with hemiparasitic behavior. And then we won't pull those, but if there's any seed heads, we'll cut them off, and then I'll come back later. Drew's method is the best one, is getting in there before the chloropyron has emerged, but we don't always do that. So this is an example of just how well, this is another challenge, how well it can hide. You can see the flowers, right? But it's very hard to see the leaves mixed in with these other native marsh plants. So you have to really almost get on your hands and knees and pick through the vegetation to find it. Again, another good reason to do it by hand. Now these guys, the contractors, it's hard to see, but on the left of them, that's kind of a purple shade, that's all the chloropyron. And they're just in there picking through it and being very careful. And yeah, again, you can see that the plants are here. That actually, I think no, that is the Duriesculum. That's the European sea lavender growing right next to the chloropyron. But it is another, oh, and then here's the native up above and a native over here. It's another good example of how well hidden they are. And that is a challenge within the vegetation. It's almost like they do it on purpose. And then here's a site that is very hidden that Drew's familiar with. It's got fences and gates all around it. So I didn't know that whole part of this property was full of limonium for quite a while. And we were able to go in a couple of years ago and get it. You can see sort of the before on the top and the after. And we're trying to get in this year. It's an issue with the owner being able to let us in because he doesn't live in town anymore and he wants to be there. This site was discovered just last year at the 11th hour. It's right behind Piatti and Ferrari dealer in Mill Valley on the little public path there. Piatti restaurant, just down the street from Goodman's Hardware, and it's just covered with it. I just found out who the owner is, and I'm trying to get in touch with them so we can try to figure out how to deal with it. In a situation like this, when it's like I said, the 11th hour is at least if they can mow it, if they can like weed whack it down so that we can, the flowers don't go to seed. We'll try that. That's what we did at the Gateway Pond in Marin City, that big pond next to the parking lot. I finally tracked down the owners of that shopping center in San Diego, and I tracked them down a couple years ago, and their landscaper is going after it each year. He's trying to remove as much as he can, but he's weed whacking the rest of it because they don't want volunteers in there. I don't think they want us, contractors in there either. So here again is that area behind the Piatti restaurant. Lots of the little guys. Somebody's mowing it. Nobody would take credit for managing this area. I asked a lot of people, and but I knew somebody was managing it. I finally found the owner through the county assessor's office. Oh, this is this is an unforeseen challenge that came up a long time ago. We were pulling the sea lavender along the shoreline with volunteers, and we heard this terrible sound of a car screeching and then other cars getting hit. And then this Ferrari came flying over the bank, literally like right past us. People were scrambling to get out of the way and landed in the water. And it's kind of a funny story now. And kind of, this is one of my favorite photos because as hard as it was to get volunteers to help us remove the plants, plenty of people came to see a Ferrari in the water. So you never know quite what you might run into with volunteers, but that was extreme. And again, I just want to thank all of the people. You guys know Eva Buxton up in the top corner. That was maybe 12 years ago with Dana Morowitz again. This was at Strawberry Marsh that Drew was talking about when it was pretty badly infested. Eva used to come out a lot and help us. And then Utah, who works at Cal-IPC, actually she's the director now, and her partner, Bob. And then early on with the Bay Area Early Detection Network, the first group who was trying to get this project off the ground is Mike Perlmutter. And again, Dana was there that day. And so through the years, there have been so many people, really different agencies, different school groups in appropriate areas, not young students. Marin County Parks, we coordinate with them, of course, Cal-IPC and Drew, and then just the property owners and managers for the most part are really great. All of the different volunteers, Kathy Boyer used to send her students over to me. Yeah, so just so many people are involved in this and helpful in, making it happen and hoping for its success. That's made it really nice. And I've been waiting to find out how much we get done with the volunteers. I mean, with the contract workers this week to know where we will be needing volunteers. And I already have two dates, the 26th of June and the 29th of June, that there's a couple of interns that want to come out. So we've set those dates and those will be volunteer days. I just don't have the location yet. So if you look at marinaudubon.org, or you can just contact me. I'm my name, Jude Stalker @gmail.com. I can let you know if anybody's interested in coming out and helping to remove it and learning exactly what it is. You're welcome. So thank you. I don't know
Thank
if there's
you.
any questions or
Just checking to see if there's anything in the chat. No, I don't see any questions in the chat. But if anyone would like to ask a question in person, they could raise their hand or just chime in.
Hi, I have a question. I have a question about the, this is Karen Holleran, about the disposal. How is this? I know it's bagged up. I'm curious if you could talk about the disposal.
I'm glad you brought that up. There's two things I wanted to bring up. One was the bags. We put them in the big heavy duty black contractor bags, and we tie them really well. If they've gotten holes in them, then we change the bag. We dispose of them in the landfill. And I know that's a big waste of plastic, but we do not want those seeds getting out. And even in the transport to the landfill, where they say they'll get them hot enough that they won't be viable. But I'm just really careful about trying not to let those seeds get out. And then we also require everyone, the contractors and the volunteers, to brush off their shoes, spray them with 70% alcohol before they come in and after they've worked. So they're not spreading, taking the seed or the little bits of soil with seed on it out of where we're working.
Oh, thank you for that.
Sure.
And in the chat, Joan Murray asks, when you refer to strawberry, do you
Yes.
include Belloc Lagoon?
That is Belloc Lagoon, yes. Drew can talk more. What we call Strawberry Marsh is Belloc Lagoon. I know that from like the older timer Marinites call it Belloc Lagoon. Yes.
We'll call it Seminary Marsh, and yeah, it's got a number of names.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, if we get any dates and locations set that we can publicize in our newsletter, we'll be doing so if the timing is
Okay.
right.
I should have them by the end of the week, so I'll send that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so we might be able to send out special notice about that, or it'll be posted as an activity, a hike, or.
And I want to say last year, Caroline Christman really did a lot to try to get people from CNPS to come out and help on one of the sites. And I really, really appreciated what she did. So.
Yes, she stepped up to be an excellent volunteer recruiter and coordinator.
If anybody wants to like try to take on their own site, please contact me. I would love it. I mean, I could help you through the first year or two, and that would be wonderful. We do have one property owner, the harbor master at a marina, who's got a pretty significant amount, and he's got that rare plant, who's paying for his now. I arrange for the contractors and I oversee them, but he pays for it. We have somebody at another site that is taking it on herself, and I'm working with her this year to make sure that, you know, she knows what she's doing. She's already a plant person. I trust her. Yeah, like I said, the landscaper at the Marin City Pond, the Gateway Plaza, he's you know, he's taking care of theirs. So there are some people that I'm hoping that the Greater Fairlawns Association takes on the sea drift infestation. There are people that are stepping up and taking a piece of it, which is really important because it's a lot. To try to do it all is a lot for me, and this is not my paid job. So yeah, anyone who wants to take on, you know, a project, then let me know. I'd be happy to help you do that.
And if individuals find populations, should they notify you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If me, again, Jude Stalker at gmail.com, or Marin Audubon, marinaudubon.org, or Cal-IPC, California Invasive Plant Council, Drew Kerr. I mean, any of us that you can find, or all of us, let us know. Even if it turns out to not be an invasive plant, that's fine. Just, if you're not sure, let us know, please.
Terrific. Okay, well, thank you so much for all the work you've done and continue to do, and we'll have to do in the future.
Yes. Yeah. But one day, maybe this rapid response that started 15 years ago will pay off. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys recognize the name down in there, Jill Templeton? I know, definitely done a bunch of limonium stuff in the strawberry area and was involved with Spartina stuff earlier on. So thank you to her.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, then I think we can close the meeting. I don't have any special announcements. We'll hope to find a speaker for July. I'm still working on that. Sometimes it's a cliffhanger. So thank you so much, Judy and Drew. They came through at the last minute when I just about despaired of finding a speaker for this month. So it was very, very interesting. And
Yeah. Thank you, Drew. That was
Pleasure.
interesting.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Mucho gusto.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.